Ready on 3.
Across Canada, thousands of people sit behind bars not because they've been found guilty of a crime, but because they're waiting. Waiting for disclosure, waiting for a court date, waiting for the system to remember them. Canada's remand centers are the unseen side of justice, the holding pens for people awaiting trial. They are supposed to be temporary, but for many, months stretch into years. Inside, the lights never turn off. Cells meant for 1 or 2 hold 3. The food is barely edible, the noise never ends. There's no real privacy, and little hope.
They leave the lights on all night. You can't sleep. The cell's freezing. After a while, you'll say anything just to get it over with.
Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms promises that no one shall be deprived of liberty, except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. Section 11B guarantees the right to be tried within a reasonable time. And Section 9 protects us all against arbitrary detention. But what happens when the state says, "We can't give you a trial yet, we're waiting for disclosure"? In other words, we don't yet have enough evidence to proceed, but we'll hold you anyway. In the world of interrogation, there are methods so cruel they've been outlawed worldwide. Sleep deprivation, isolation, humiliation, starvation, techniques designed to break the human spirit, to force confession, submission, compliance. Yet many of these same conditions are found inside Canadian remand centers, not as punishment, but as pretrial detention.
Prolonged uncertainty and sensory deprivation create the same psychological outcomes we see in interrogation victims: anxiety, learned helplessness, cognitive decline, and increased compliance.
When a person says, "Just send me to prison, it's easier there," we should ask what kind of pretrial system drives people to prefer prison, and yet it happens every day. Canadian prosecutors often cite waiting for disclosure as justification for delay. Yet during that same delay, the accused remains detained, presumed innocent, yet punished as guilty. Under Canada's own laws, this is a contradiction. Under international law, it may be a crime.
No exceptional circumstances whatsoever may be invoked to justify torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment.
Extended deprivation of sleep, sensory assault, humiliation, and psychological pressure. All are recognized as cruel or inhuman treatment by the United Nations and by Canada's own Criminal Code section 269.1, which defines torture by public officials. Pre-sentence jails have become profitable. Food is minimal, but canteens sell extra snacks at inflated prices. Radios cost up to $45 for a device worth $10. Even bail money earns interest while sitting in government accounts. The longer a person waits, the more the system profits. The more they suffer, the more likely they are to plead guilty, even if innocent. That's not justice. That's coercion. Internationally, Canada's remand conditions would raise red flags. The United Nations Nelson Mandela rules set minimum standards for the treatment of prisoners: adequate food, medical care, sleep, and human dignity. By those standards, most Canadian remand centers fail.
When we compare the conditions in Canadian remand facilities to recognized interrogation techniques, the similarities are disturbing. Canada risks breaching not only its charter, but its treaty obligations under the Convention Against Torture and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights.
Responsibility runs deep. Prosecutors who delay disclosure, judges who routinely deny bail, politicians who underfund courts and overcrowd jails, correctional officials who tolerate cruelty as normal. Canada cannot claim to uphold human rights abroad while violating them at home. The citizenry has adopted a childlike stance, expecting the full privileges of a free society without embracing the necessary burdens of democratic responsibility. What solutions do we have? Enforce strict time limits for trial and disclosure. No more excuses. Reverse the presumption toward detention. Ban continuous lighting, forced nudity, and overcrowding. ending torture tactics. Provide supervised medical detox and real health care. No one should die on the floor while jail staff walks by neglecting their responsibilities. End profiteering from canteens and bail accounts. Would this system be the same if money weren't involved? Compensate those wrongfully held on remand. During the bail process, tertiary grounds speak to the strength of the Crown's case. If the court is using this as its basis to deny bail, it should be prepared to financially stand by its decision. Make public data on remand delays, conditions, and outcomes. Transparency is the only way to ensure compliance.
Justice delayed is justice denied. But when delay becomes a tool of pressure, justice becomes cruelty.
The Charter was meant to protect us all, especially the innocent. Yet today, in the name of procedure and delay, Canada's bail system quietly mirrors the same coercive methods the world condemns as inhumane. Canada has always prided itself on fairness, on justice, on compassion. Yet within our own borders, in the cold concrete of remand centers, the truth tells a darker story. We are detaining the presumed innocent in conditions harsher than those of the convicted. We are coercing pleas through deprivation, delay, and despair. We are repeating the same moral blindness that once justified the residential schools and the Sixties Scoop. Believing that procedure excuses cruelty, that law can mask injustice. Waiting for disclosure has become the new language of control, a sterile phrase that hides human suffering. Behind every file number is a person, a parent, a child, a life paused without proof of guilt. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms was written to prevent exactly this: arbitrary detention, cruel treatment, and the erosion of dignity. Yet we stand by as these rights are bent beyond recognition. History has already shown us where silence leads. When the government acts as both accuser and jailer, justice ceases to exist. The bail system, as applied today, is not merely flawed. It is an instrument of coercion dressed in the robes of law. We said, never again, after the residential schools. We said it after the Sixties Scoop. And yet, again, it is happening. In cells instead of classrooms, under the watch of lawyers instead of priests. The time to act is now, to reform bail, to end indefinite pretrial detention, to remember that justice delayed is not justice served, it is justice denied. Canada must choose to remain blind to the quiet suffering within its own walls, or to open its eyes, face its reflection, and finally live up to the charter it wrote in its own name.